Hello, everyone. Welcome to America, Some Assembly Required. Anna Maria and I will be talking about the how-tos of building and operating our American state assemblies and committees. We do have a schedule of topics that we are working through, and we will have moderators in the chat. We'll only take questions on the topic of the day, and it is listed in the chat. As we go along week after week, we hope to address and answer your questions on building your state assembly. So today's topic is going to be, we're going to start discussing when Anna gets here, the Sessions Committee, which is a new committee that has been added to our list of committees. And then we will also talk about the how-tos of committees. What's the work of the committee? How does it work within the committee? And how to move forward in our committees of the General Assembly. So let's stick to the topics and let's assemble. So today we were going to be talking about the Sessions Committee. And my impression of the Sessions Committee is that committee calls us in and out of the cycle of our sessions. So in the assembling phase that we're all in at this point, still, even the Ohio Assembly is still sort of in their assembling phase. So that means that we're meeting on a pretty consistent basis. We have our General Assembly meeting every 2 weeks. We have a militia assembly on the opposite 2 weeks. And then we have our General Assembly, say, for example, on Thursday evenings. And our International Business Assembly is meeting every Saturday. There's still a lot of work to be done in terms of getting out notices, setting up processes and procedures within our committees. And so, we're in constant session right at this point. The good news is that eventually we all will get to take a break because the sessions will come in and out for the most part. And so we'll put a calendar together, and then we'll have that calendar of meeting together and be able to move within that calendar. So Anna has joined us, so I'm going to bring her on stage. Hi, Anna.
Good morning.
Good morning. Afternoon, or depending on your time zone.
Right.
Exactly. Great podcast the time before. Good topics to talk about. Lots of detail.
Yeah.
So I was just introducing the Sessions Committee and explaining that right now, while we're in the assembling phase, that we are constantly in session. And we've been in constant session since 2019.
Right.
And so, it takes a lot of work. It's taking a lot of work and a lot of dedication and consistency to get our general assemblies all up and operating in all of their various sub-assemblies and committees.
Yep.
So eventually, the good news, as I was telling everyone, is that we will get to take a little bit of a break in between, right?
Well, our government was designed so that we didn't have to spend all our time governing. Okay? Our government isn't meant to be in constant session because everybody else has lives and work to do. All right? We're not professional politicians. There's no such thing as a professional politician in the American government. Does not exist. Everybody else has we all have lives. We all have families. We have businesses. We have farms to run. We're all busy people that have lives apart from government. So we don't have any kind of professional politician working in our government. What you're used to is foreign to our government. Okay? And actually is not our government at all. It's subcontractors providing government services. All right? So our government does not work with a vast cadre of bureaucrats. It does not have any professional politicians that, make a career out of representing anyone. Because why? Because we are self-governing. We present ourselves. We don't depend on representation. Okay. And so each one of us is acting in a capacity as an individual, as a living individual. And we're not acting as a person until and unless we're elected to an office. And then we become a what? An official. All right. And we only stay in that person during the length of the term of our office. Okay. So even now, for example, Donald Trump is president-elect. All right. Well, what does that really mean? He hasn't entered into the office of the president as yet. He's still operating in a private capacity. He hasn't been what? Sworn in. Okay. So in their government, in the British territorial government, the U.S. government, he is in a presumptive status. And when he enters office, he will be in office for 4 years. Okay? We all know this, but we don't think about it. And we need to think about these things. We need
And
to
then he
think
gets to
about
go back and be his own person, his own man, his own business, whatever he decides to do, or just retire and kick back and enjoy life, right?
Right, right. Well, and look at Prince Philip. You know, he served alongside the Queen for 75 years. And at a certain point, he said, okay, well, that's enough. And I am going to retire from public life. Okay. He left the status of being a person and being responsible in public, right, to being a private person, a private individual, a private man. Okay. And we all do this. We all have the option. We don't have to have a public persona. We do not have to be part of any kind of system of governance, except that as Americans, we're called upon to self-govern. Okay.
Right. Right. And that self-governance means that we don't necessarily have someone representing us or representing us, that we have a direct vote in the things that are going on. On our assembly, and when I do intakes for status correction, I always remind them that the power is them, that it is in their direct vote, and that if they don't get actively involved in their government, and they just let other people make decisions for them, they could end up back where they started.
Exactly. That's how we got into this mess in the first place.
That's right.
This is how the silent majority fell silent.
Exactly. Exactly. And so this morning, I said, a lot of you are remaining silent. You need to be speaking up at our meeting. You know, if you've got an opinion, if you've got, any kind of thing, step up. Let's hear your voice.
Well, and hey, I'm a perfect example. You may know something that somebody else doesn't know.
That's right.
No.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So the whole calendar of our government originally was built on an agricultural cycle.
Mm-hmm.
They put their government together in between when they weren't busy doing their farm trade at home, because that was the majority of the trade at the time. And so those cycles went, and you can kind of see remnants of that in the federal government today, in the fact that they start their sessions in October and they end them sometime around April or May most of the time.
Right.
So or March, because that was basically the winter break, where they went out of session, and they all went home to their home territory. and they did their regular jobs, right? They went and they harvested. They were all done with their harvest, and by October, most of them. And then they went home for the winter months. And then they started in the spring planting season, getting their fields ready and things. So they had to be back out in the fields March or April, depending on where they were in the zone. And then that way they basically took off most of the summer, right?
Right.
With the exception that they might get called back in on an important issue.
Right. So the time to conduct the business of the government and to set in motion the will of the people was basically from the winter months. Okay, the impetus came from the discussions during the winter months and the decisions that were made in the winter months. And then there was another window in mid-summer when emergency business could be addressed. And everything that could be tabled until the winter months was, but the things that had to be dealt with as on an emergency basis were handled at high summer when the crops were already in and growing.
Okay.
So you basically had one large wintertime government session and a possibility of a smaller window where you'd have business taken care of in the summer.
So like, for example, it could be something like from July the 15th to August the 15th, right?
Right.
Usually in between any kind of harvesting activity that went on.
Yeah. And this was just dictated by the life of the country as an agrarian society and the fact that most of the actual business was not being the business of the individuals was not taking place in the winter for the most part. Okay, so things were set up so that people could participate when there was downtime in the life cycle of the agrarian culture, right? And so the government itself was designed to come into and out of session. It came into session in the late fall, early winter. It went out of session in the spring to allow everyone to go home and plant their crops for the next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it came back into session briefly in the summer to take care of any emergency business. So you had maybe 2 weeks in the summer, and then it waited again until the winter. And there was this natural progression of coming into session and out of session, into session and out of session. And even the federal Congresses did this. And the federal Congresses were usually split up into 2 sessions, just as we've described. The one session taking place in the winter and one session taking place in the summer. In between the crop, the need to plant crops and the need to harvest crops.
Right. So when would you recommend that an assembly begin to adopt that type of schedule?
Well, once we've got everything set up again and people know their roles, and when we have coordinators, however we're going to redefine them, when we have people that are set up to be able to bring the state back into session rapidly and efficiently, that's when we should start thinking about going back to our seasonal government sessions so that we have first session, second session, and so that we have a break so that our people can rest, so that research can be done, and so that there is a natural rhythm to our government again, instead of running full tilt 24/7, 365 days a year, which is, it was never intended. That's not the way the American government is structured.
Right. So on this sessions committee, who would be the recommended members, or is it just made up of the general body?
Well, a sessions committee is usually those composed of the standing committee functionaries that are most responsible for the conduct of the business. So, for example, a state treasurer doesn't get a break. A state treasurer is going to be there 12 months. So they're a member of the sessions committee. And, they're one of the key people that is expected to fund the preparation for the session. Where are we going to meet? Who's going to pay the bar bill? Things like that. For example, the state treasurer is always a member of the sessions committee. Typically, the state ombudsman will be a member of the sessions committee. Typically, you will see that one or more of the justices of the state will serve on the sessions committee. And you will see the people that are, what we now call coordinators or circuit riders or liaison officers or whatever you're going to dub the ones that bring the session into session and help organize everyone to do that are going to be members of your sessions committee.
Okay. All right, that's good. So we have the treasurer, the ombudsman, a justice, possibly, and then a liaison or coordinator,
or 24 of them.
Yes. Okay. All right.
Okay. And those people are going to be the ones that actually go out into every little hamlet and make sure that everybody knows that, hey, we're coming into session on July 3rd. Here's where we're going to meet. Here's how we're going to meet.
So does the sessions committee also operate that way at the county level as the counties become populated and organized?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Now,
great.
A lot of counties maintain session on a monthly basis instead of a biannual kind of thing. A lot of the counties stay in session and have monthly meetings throughout the year because basically their sessions are not as big a deal. They don't have as much business to conduct. The issues that they address are local, and so they just post a county meeting at such and such a time and place, and here's the agenda. Here are all the things that have been brought forward in the past month that need to be discussed or continuanced for additional discussion from 3 months ago, right? And they just do a monthly meeting usually. They don't usually go out of session in the same way that the states do, because by their very nature, the topics that the county assemblies deal with don't tend to be the earth-shattering, huge things that take months and months to decide, okay? It's usually pretty snappy conduct of business type things that the county deals with. And so a sessions committee, yes, they have a sessions committee. And the sessions committee is responsible for bringing them into session, right?
Right.
But most counties meet monthly and always have.
Right. So you brought up a really important little detail in that the sessions committee sets sort of the agendas for the session. So they're gathering issues and in the interim, and then they put that basically or put it on an agenda that goes then into the assembly.
Right. And so, for example, the issue of independence was one of those thorny issues that nobody could even talk about until it was agreed upon that they could talk about it.
Interesting.
And so it had to get on the agenda. Right?
Right.
So there was this big argument. And the whole issue of independence, whether or not we should declare our independence from the king, was stalled for a long time by one man named John Dickinson from Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And he didn't want to talk about it. He loved the king and he loved the British system, and he had done well under it, and he didn't want to change. And by golly, he wasn't even going to discuss it. And it took a full roll call vote of the delegations to the Continental Congress to overcome that one objection.
Right. That was in the musical 1776, right? The entire process of them getting to discuss freedom as their topic.
Right, to get it on the agenda, okay?
Right.
And so I think we can see the importance of being able to discuss things and the importance of being able to get things on the agenda. And yes, the Sessions Committee is the committee that collects agenda items in the interim to be discussed at the current meeting,
Okay.
the upcoming meeting.
Right. Okay. So if one of those items, let's just say one of those items falls to a particular committee, is that then directed to the committee, or is it first discussed in the assembly and then directed to a committee? How does that generally work?
Well, usually say that there's a topic. Okay, someone brings forward a topic. Say the topic is zoning, which has been imposed on municipal citizens by the municipal government. Okay? So all of the citizenry of the municipal government are corporations, right? So this is just affecting corporations. It's not supposed to affect anybody else. Unfortunately, we've all been redefined under their system as corporations. And they have set up arbitrary divisions. Your land under their system is going to be classified as either agricultural, residential, or commercial.
Right.
Those are the only three choices. And they have their own definitions of whether your land is agricultural, residential, or commercial. And they arbitrarily set up these little planning grids, and they say, oh, well, all the property within these lines are commercial, and all of the property in this area is agricultural, and all the property over here is residential. And then they tax you accordingly. Okay, so you're sitting here, you're Joe Average American, you're not a corporation, you're not subject to zoning, and your land isn't subject to zoning. You're the odd man out, right? All these other people are going along with this and acquiescing to it and agreeing to be zoned and have their land managed by these foreign usurpers. And what are you going to do about it? Well, now that your government is in session and your government is party to the constitutions, now your government can enforce the Constitution on the municipal government and say, the hell you beller. I'm not, our people are not subject to your zoning matrix. We haven't agreed to this. And we're not going to be zoned and taxed according to your scheme. You can tax your own corporations all you like, but we're not fictions. We're not creatures of your imagination. And then you can exempt yourselves from a zoning plan. Well, maybe this is going to be the subject of your next meeting, right? It gets placed on the agenda in the interim, and then the people who have placed it on the agenda have either done significant research that they wish to present at the meeting, or they've just uncovered that this is an issue and they want to discuss it with everybody. Okay, so one of two things: either they've done the research already or they haven't. If they just come forward and say, hey guys, this is a problem because, we've got people living on their farm that are getting charged commercial rates and taxed as commercial entities when they're not even incorporated. And, they bring forward the issues, the questions, the problems. And at that point, guess what? Oh, well, this goes to our litigation committee. This goes to our business committee. This goes to our, whichever committee is appropriate, or committees. Okay, the General Assembly decides to send it to these committees for research.
All right.
Okay, so the committees go and they do their job. They figure out, they learn about it. They figure out what's going on. They come back, they report to the General Assembly. Then the General Assembly takes action on it.
Right. So if the General Assembly is not meeting and they're not in session, the committees are not meeting necessarily either then? Is that correct?
Committees at the county level can meet anytime.
Right.
And at the state level, they can meet anytime in theory, so long as it's a public meeting.
Okay. All right. And public meaning that anyone on your state or your county can attend. It's not
And
just
everybody gets notice.
Yes.
Everybody gets notice, okay? Now, if you're doing research, you're in a different status than if you're, taking an action. And committees are researching during interims so that they can bring forward information for action by the General Assembly.
Right. Right. Good. Okay. So it's appropriate then for that sessions committee to say meet in the last month of the current session to then schedule for the next session's meetings. Right.
So that everybody knows when they will be meeting again.
Right.
One of the great problems that resulted from the Southern delegation walking out of the States of America Confederation meeting was that they left it sine die without a stipulated date when they would return to session.
So, for example, right now, I just was talking with everyone this morning. I would pull together my sessions committee, and we would sit down and look at all the dates on the calendar for next year. Mm-hmm. And we would propose that schedule of dates and meetings for the General Assembly prior to the end of the year. And we're going to roll forward then, because we're not really not meeting in the summer. We could not meet in the summer a little bit, but we're doing basically an every 2 week kind of General Assembly meeting.
Right.
So, yes. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Here are your sessions.
Yes. Perfect. So great. That gives us a lot of details as to, what a sessions committee is, who's on the sessions committee. And of course, anybody can join a sessions committee, but the key elements of that are our treasurers, our ombudsman, a justice, and
the coordinators or
and
people
the coordinators. Thank you. Had a brain fart. So then anybody who would wish to be on that committee and have input to the committee can be on that committee throughout, the session or as the planning begins. And then, the topic gathering. So for right now, while we're all in state assembly mode, those would basically be things that were sent to the secretary of the assembly, correct? To begin to gather that information together for the next session.
Right. Or since we're in assembling process, we're basically in constant session, right?
Right.
And it's just a matter of when the meetings take place.
Mhm.
And so in this case, in this situation, everything is much more fluid. Everything is, we're not actually going out of session
Mhm.
and then having to, bring forward a roster of elected officials from a prior session, right?
Right.
Okay. We're actually in a 24-hour, 7-day a week, 365 session to come into session.
It's a lot of work, isn't it?
Yeah, well, if you walk away from a machine and you don't give it any maintenance for 160 years, you should expect that you're going to be doing a lot of work to get
Got
it
to
back.
grease every gear and wheel, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. We're having to rebuild things from the ground up. And that restoration process is very arduous. And then once we get the basic machine rebuilt, then we have all these other things that have to be rebuilt. Once you have the state up and operating, then you have to get each of your counties up and operating.
Mhm.
After your counties are operating, you have to get your Congress up and operating. So it's a lot of work. But at the end of the day, you reclaim your destiny from the bureaucrats and the hirelings. Because remember, they have the advantage in that they're being paid to usurp your leadership,
Right.
while
right.
you are expected to have enough concern for your own well-being not to leave the foxes in charge of your hen house.
That's right. That's right. So Anna, kind of in teasing along here a little bit, it is a lot of work, and it is, but it is okay for our assemblies, for example, to take off a little time,
Yes.
in certain spots. You can miss a meeting or two, during our holiday season, or not be in session during that holiday season
Right.
and come back in.
Right.
It's not as if we have to completely, do that business,
Right.
and
And don't forget, the Federation is always there. The Federation is always, always functioning.
right.
So if something comes up, if there's some huge international dust up and we have to have you come back into session, we'll notify you. We will get in touch with the coordinator for New Hampshire, for example, and we'll let them know that, okay, well, here's the issue. We have to have a decision on this. Here's the information we have about it. And then the word goes out and boom, the states come back into session in order on an emergency basis
Mhm.
to answer that particular question.
Right. Okay.
So
That's
you're
great.
not just left to drift along. If something really important shows up, we'll scream bloody murder for help.
Of course. Of course. So, we've been through all of the committees. We've kind of described all of the committees of the General Assembly. And over the last several weeks. And let's talk a little bit about how the committees actually work. Because we've talked about what they do, but we haven't actually talked about the working of the committee. So, for example, a topic gets brought to the General Assembly, and the General Assembly says that issue needs to go to the let's say, education committee. And the education committee comes in and it looks at that, whatever that issue is.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to do its research. And it starts to do its discussion. Sometimes that's a debate, right? In terms of the philosophies and ideas. And we were talking about this a little bit this morning in one of our meetings of what the premise of debate, what, discussion, debate, what is, when people are passionate about their issue, and they do get passionate sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
the protocol, what the protocol is in that discussion. Because as long as they're not, calling you an idiot, right? for the way you think. And even sometimes, even if they do, the debate or the discussion should have some substance, some research, some fact to it, correct?
Right. What we're looking for are productive discussions, not just discussions of opinion. Okay. To the extent that we can base our discussions on facts, they tend to be productive because people can address facts and come to rational conclusions as a group. But when your discussion centers around things like beliefs and opinions, then what you're likely to get are unproductive discussions where there is no conclusion or there can be no conclusion. The grand example of that is discussions about God. Well, what we know about God is either directly observable in the creation, right? Or it's based on traditions and secondhand information that's been passed down to us by earlier generations of mankind, right?
Right.
You can get into, you can argue all day, but the law of gravity is the law of gravity. It's there, it's factual. And if your decision making involves regard of something that's directly observable, well, then you can get to conclusions. If you throw John here off the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, he's going to hit the ground at a specific moment, okay? So some things lend themselves to productive and factual discussions, like natural law. Other things that are about the beliefs that people have about natural law are not productive. So you want to steer away from non-productive discussion and keep centered on things that are agreeable, what our ancestors called agreeable, things that can be discussed on a factual basis and that can be observed. Okay? So we try to keep our discussions based on fact instead of belief. Okay, because that doesn't belong in a government. A government is not a theocracy. We don't have a theocracy. We're not about belief. We're about fact. Okay, so
Right.
Okay, we're trying to keep our discussions in our committees based on fact.
Right. And so, a lot of times what I've observed is that a lot of people operate from feeling. They're not used to doing the research, operating from a factual basis,
Right.
and having research to back up what they're doing. And whenever we operate from that point of emotion or from those feelings that we have rather than the facts and some people would say facts and evidence, but I would say facts, things that are solidly based that we can point to and say, oh, look here, you don't actually have to throw Joe off the building to realize what terminal velocity is. But, we've already tested that and there's factual evidence out there to show those that have
Right.
tested that theory, right? We don't have to do it again. So, but if we only talk about how we feel about Joe being thrown off the building, that's not going to go anywhere. Right.
Everybody's going to have a different opinion. Everybody's going to have a different feeling.
People are going to say good for Joe. Some are going to say good for whoever threw Joe off the building. And some are going to say, no, that's never should be the way it goes on because, well, it hurt Joe. Right. And our committees need to focus in on exactly the fact of what it is, Yeah.
What are we trying to resolve here?
Right. Exactly.
What information do we need to resolve this particular question?
Right.
Okay. Giving your example. Okay. It got referred to the education committee. So it's a topic about educating who? Well, either educating the members or educating the public or both. Those are our options, right? So first determination, is this an internal education effort or an external education effort, or does it apply to both? Okay, we come to a factual decision about that, right?
Right.
Okay, having determined the scope of the problem or the opportunity as it may be, then we go through, okay, well, is the proposed video series the best way to do this? Or are there other ways that might be better? Maybe what we need to do is a series of public lectures instead of a video series. Or maybe we need to do a series of public lectures and videotape them so that we have a record we can share on. And what are the expenses? And who would we get to do the lectures? All these different things, we're trying to solve problems. We're trying to answer questions.
It's the 6 questions we all learned in 3rd grade. Who, what, when, where, how, and why.
Right.
Okay.
And usually we start out with what. Okay. The what in this case might be a new educational program that we want ultimately to be on video. But do we do that by hiring a video production company and doing basically a PowerPoint type presentation where you have graphs and things that are displayed and cartoon characters and that sort of thing? Or do we do it with a lecture series that we tape? And these are the kinds of questions that would come up, But in order to answer it, we have to start out with what we want. Where do we want to go with this? And what audience do we want to effectively address? What medium are we going to use to address them? What style of presentation do we want? Do we want this to be homey and very accessible and easy to understand? Do we want this to be something delivered at a 4th grade educational and reading level? Or do we want a 6th grade or 10th grade or, what are we after here? How much data has to be displayed? Okay. Do we really need to show charts? Would that help to get the message across? If we're going to be talking about something like banking, if we're trying to educate the public about something like banking, well, it would be very handy, wouldn't it, to be able to show charts and changes over time. And, what happened in 1929? What precipitated this crisis? How did we guard ourselves, or did we fail to guard ourselves from something like that happening again? Well, some topics are more technical than others. And then the education committee should be able to look at the topic and go, yeah, well, we're going to need charts and graphs and, that sort of presentation to get this information across.
Right. Always keeping in mind who their audience is.
Right.
And who's going to make the presentation. And sometimes it's more the who of going to make the presentation than it is sometimes everything else that goes with it,
Right.
Yeah, it really, and that's kind of the way the committees begin to make their decisions. So in the committees, when you've got an issue that comes in, think about the 6 questions, right? The who, what, when, where, why, and how of whatever issue it is, and what, who, what. I think I got what, didn't I? So,
Now, how much?
oh, how, oh, and how much? Yes, yeah,
Yes, that's the other kind of floating question that isn't included in the main 6, but which always comes in, and it's always the cost effectiveness. I mean, if we had an unlimited budget and we could just, afford to have a professional production company come in and do our, plot it out to our joint satisfaction. That's a whole different kind of prospect than, okay, well, we have to kind of depend upon a volunteer cameraman and, our own equipment. So that is another consideration that our committees have to take in is, how much can we afford?
right. That's right. It's exactly right. So, especially committees like IT, big bills get stacked up quick in IT, right?
Right. And
So,
so our IT guys are always under a gun, regarding how much money we have to be able to put into the IT program.
right. So from there, once the committee does the 7 deadly deeds of the committee, and they get to a decision, and the committee takes a vote to move an issue forward,
Right.
then that issue possibly, and I always tell everyone this is about consensus building,
Right.
because one of the things that we have to do is, even though we are not political parties, we are still a body politic.
Right.
And we have to gain the consensus of other members of our assemblies.
Right.
And so it's a good idea in that discussion of the 7th issue is to maybe go to the Treasury Committee and say, hey, we're going to do this and it's going to cost us this much. And this is what we think. And maybe we need a fundraiser, or maybe we need, to bring this issue up. But we would like you to see the merits of our project. And we would like you to endorse these plans to fund this issue.
Right. Well, and typically what will happen, the committee does all this kind of background consideration and discussion and fact finding and blah, 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 and they come up with a recommendation. Well, then they either appoint the chair of the assembly or a member of the chair of the committee or a member of the committee to make the presentation to the General Assembly and summarize the results of this process. Okay, so if I were the spokesperson for the committee appearing before the General Assembly, I would give a very brief statement of, okay, this was referred to our committee as a question. Here's the question we started with. And then we went through a series of discussions and we explored different possible ways to answer this need or answer this question, or, whatever's appropriate. And, here are the 2 the strongest and best recommendations we could come up with. We could either do it this way or we could do it that way. And this will cost us, estimated this much, and this will cost us estimated that much. And our anticipation is that this would give us great coverage within the assembly and give us a good series of talking points for the public. And this option would give us a broad spectrum general purpose presentation that would be helpful to anyone. So, here are the 2 possible recommendations that we've thoroughly researched, and here's our anticipated cost, and here's the anticipated result. What does the General Assembly choose?
Right. Right. And sometimes that committee comes down to, this is what we recommend. And
Sometimes there's just one recommendation.
right.
And
But
sometimes they come back and they say, well, we considered this question and we just couldn't find a good answer for it at the present time.
right. Right. But in the course of doing that and gaining that consensus, when you involve other where the work touches maybe other committees,
Right.
gaining their consensus within, and that's kind of the job of the chair of the committee, is to take that information, talk about it in the other committee, gain their consensus with the issues or their advice, or they may have other input or ideas to put into it, to take that back to the committee, maybe adjust their plans, and then the committee basically votes to move the issue on, right?
Right. Well, say that a question or a proposal is initiated in the General Assembly from an agenda item that was brought up and then was sent to the Education Committee for consideration. The Education Committee starts looking at it and says, this is an outreach issue too. This is something that the Outreach Committee should be involved in. And so they go to outreach. Okay, and then outreach looks at it in terms of not just an educational program, but what is the potential of using this educational program to outreach to the public? And maybe if it's going to be a lecture series, it's also going to involve not just outreach, but events. Okay, because if we're going to have a lecture series and if we're going to open it up to the public as an outreach, well, then we're going to have to plan it as an event, as a public event. Okay, so suddenly we've got education, outreach, and events all
Pulling
having
together.
input
Pulling together.
on the whole program, the whole thing. Okay, and we all have enough brains to figure out which committees might need to be consulted or should be consulted in the overall planning of
Sure.
an educational program.
I've run into some assemblies, though, as I've talked to the assemblies, that feel like their committees are, unto themselves. They make the decision, they do this, they don't need any other. No, that is not the way we're supposed to work. And so, it's an important part of the discussion as to how the committees work, because we are supposed to be in a cooperative and collaborative nature among our entire assembly.
Right, and that goes for the sub-assemblies too. Committees don't actually make decisions in our government. Committees bring forward recommendations, they bring forward research, they bring forward facts, but they do not make decisions. They're not autonomous. We had this come up in California recently, where, committees were meeting and purportedly making decisions. They can't make decisions for the assembly.
No.
Committees are there as the feet and hands of an assembly to do the research and make the recommendations and whatnot. But if they come forward and say that all the members of a assembly committee are all gung-ho for this one particular project or whatnot, and the General Assembly looks at it and goes, well, in the great scheme of things, we can't afford it right now. We have other more urgent needs. Sorry, Education Committee, that one's going to have to wait. We have to bulk up our ham radio equipment purchases for the militia. No matter what, all of your good work for a committee may get archived for a later date.
That's right.
And so
it gets moved on to the General Assembly, and the General Assembly is, as we discussed in one of the early sessions, is our voting, our reporting, and our voting assembly.
Right.
That's where the decisions, the finality of decisions gets made.
And the same thing happens with the sub-assemblies.
Mhm.
Say militia. Okay. So the militia has its own committees. Who knew? Well, of course it has its own committees. You know, why would a committee of the General Assembly be considering the pros and cons of a CB radio system?
Right.
No, that's something that a militia committee will be looking at. Okay, well, number one, should we have a citizens broadband communication system? You know, for close communication in a community. Okay, should we do this? Uh, if so, what kind of system should we have? Where are we going to have nodes in the system for transponding messages on to the outskirts of our community? You know, all these different things are interesting. All of them are worth discussing and looking at, but not from the standpoint of the entire General Assembly. Okay, that is something that a committee within the militia is going to look at, and they're going to make a recommendation back to the militia. The militia is going to look at it and go, well, that's really nice, but maybe that's number 10 on our list. Okay.
Mhm.
And then the militia, when they make their report back to the General Assembly, is going to say, well, here's what we looked at in the course of the last month or whatever. And we're making a recommendation that as soon as funds become available, after we've taken care of these primary needs, that we should have a CB system. Okay. So you've reported back to the General Assembly. Decisions are going to be made about funding what, when, where. Okay. And everybody is going to be in consensus about, what are the priorities.
And then to add to that, then in that situation, in that scenario, then the General Assembly approves that.
Right. Exactly.
So,
Same sort of thing with the International Business Assembly. They have committees. You have an IBA finance committee. Okay. So the International Business Assembly is considering a project with a neighboring state to build a levee system on a river that is, on the border between the two states. Okay. And it's going to cost $50 million. Okay. And each state is being asked to pony up half of it. Well, both states benefit from establishing the levee. Both states have an equal interest in the infrastructure that's being created, right? So it's reasonable that each state pay half of the cost of developing the levee system to prevent flooding in the low-lying areas surrounding the river system that their state share, right?
right.
Okay, so they have an engineering committee. Each state IBA has an engineering committee. Okay, the engineering committee looks at the various options. Okay, there's new technology for building levee systems. Who knew? They know because they're engineers. This is their profession, their job, their area. Okay, so they check out all the options and they make their recommendation as to, what is the best, most cost-effective engineering answer. Okay, so then what happens? Because it's a two-state interstate project, the two committees come up with either the same or different recommendations to their IBA. And then what happens? Well, then you call in the federales. You call in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. You start looking at it from a bigger and broader perspective. If these two state international business assemblies agree to fund this, what effect is it going to have on states downriver?
Sure.
you know. And so you start this entire process of analyzing the need, I mean, first and foremost, then establishing the method. How are we going to answer this need? Who's affected by our solution? What kind of consensus do we have to build here to fund it and do it?
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly. So there's, there's any of the assemblies that think that cooperation and collaboration is not part of their committees is really, that's not right. It's wrong. And they need to realize that, again, even though we're not a body politic, we do have to consensus build on our ideas. And when we do that and we get the input of other people and we seek their cooperation and their collaboration in that, we are constantly building towards a positive effect when we go to vote on it in a general assembly. Everyone suddenly has gotten, the endorsements that they need, whether that's financial or the ideas or whatever, to move forward and hopefully be able to make a successful presentation then to their general assembly towards a vote.
Right. And, it should come down to one page.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it should not, no general assembly should ever be presented with the thousands of pages worth of discussion and interaction that go into a major building project. It should come down to a very, very simple, truthful proposal. Here's the proposal. Here's how much it would cost. Here are the anticipated benefits. Yes or no?
Right. That's it. So as we move through those committees, and the ultimate decision of the General Assembly, everything falls underneath it, realize that they have to move those things up into the General Assembly so that everyone on the state knows and can agree.
Right. And
or disagree if they wish.
Right. And you have to realize that at each level of our government, there are different things that come into play. The state is going to be handling international and interstate business. Okay. And so what would typically happen with the state of state organizations is that this would go before their legislature. In our case, the General Assembly acts as the legislature.
Correct. It's direct presentation, right?
Right. Direct presentation. And so our state assembly dictates how its money is going to be spent, how its resources are going to be developed or not developed. The state assembly comes up with the overall picture. This is what we want. Okay. We want a levee system on the Mississippi River that's going to protect our state borders from being eroded on the riverside, and is going to protect the development of the farmlands and the homes along the Mississippi River. Okay. If this is something that your state assembly wants, then it is incumbent on the state assembly to act and to speak to its ideas about what it wants. And then it is up to the state of state legislature to provide what it wants. Okay? The state assembly is supposed to provide the big picture. Here's what we want. Here's how we want our resources developed. Here's a specific resource. We want that resource developed. Here's how we want it developed. Okay, state legislature, here's your little portion of that you need to figure out, and then we're going to put it into action.
Right, exactly. And that's where directives then to the state come in, or to the state legislatures,
Or to the federal government.
or to the federal government.
Okay, in our example, the Mississippi River adjoins many different states. The U.S. Corps of Army Engineers is generally responsible for questions regarding the development or lack of development of levee systems on the Mississippi River. Why? Because it's a navigable international waterway. Okay, so you're going to wind up having to work with and work through questions about building a levee system on the Mississippi with who? With the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you're probably going to have to work through other, like the Environmental Protection Agency and various other federal entities that are going to be there trying to represent and protect the interests of all the other states that could be affected, to make sure that everybody gets a good result, and
Right.
that we're not just creating problems for our neighbors downstream, or we're not just, mindlessly killing off a species of fish that is important to the entire ecosystem of the river.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. Or we're blocking the navigable water by a levee or a dam or something like that we provide for the function of navigation on those by locks or whatever.
Right.
All of that has to be built in and thought of, the effects up and downstream.
Right.
So,
and we have to be thinking of what is the primary thing? To protect the people and their assets, right?
Right.
And to cause no injury.
That's right.
We don't want to hurt anybody or anything else. We just want what's best for our state. Okay. And as long as what's best for our state can work with a consensus to be a consensual good, or at least lacking any harm to others, well, then we're free to do it. There's no reason why not.
Right. Right. Exactly. So I'm not seeing a lot of questions. I think we're pretty well getting into those details so that everyone's really kind of digesting what we've talked about today in terms of, all of the ins and outs of the committees. So, yeah.
And we love our committees. Our committees are our hands and feet. That's the way to look at it. The committees are what make everything run. Okay. Ultimately, it's the committees that research. It's the committees that make recommendations. It's the committees that do the work. And we love our committees.
Good point. Committees do the work. That means every member of a committee is there to do their part. And, and sometimes that is learning, but as they're learning, they should also be researching and helping to comprehend the topics that go into it, so that their voice, their thoughts, their opinions, and their research is brought forward within the committees.
And their experience as individuals.
Yes.
Because oftentimes the real fail-safe is that somebody already been there and done that and tried that, and here's how it actually happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I think it's important. I run into this every once in a while where people say, well, I just don't think I have enough knowledge. And my answer is, if you have interest, the knowledge will come, and you have to do your part to work. And on Ohio, when we initiated our International Business Assembly, of the willing citizens to sit on it at this point, the very first meeting, I said, this is a working assembly. If you're here to only listen, but you're not here to help, this is not the assembly or the committees for you to be on. Okay. I'm not stopping anybody, but I'm just telling you, work will be required, right?
This is active, yes. This is definitely an active group. It's something, we have to be moving forward. We can't just be sitting around twiddling our thumbs or thinking about things in theory.
Right.
And I think that, early on, we presented the Federation presented the assemblies with certain yes or no questions that were very important at the time. Questions like, shall we enroll all the state territorial states that have completed the development under the Northwest Ordinance? Shall we enroll them as full states of the Union? Okay, well, there's an example of just how important your state assembly is, because prior to that, we didn't have the state assemblies in session to be able to ask that question. Okay. Later on, we floated a public law which protected our people from GMO claims of ownership by patent holders that were surreptitiously injecting people with patented materials and then presenting a commercial ownership claim against them. Okay, we prevented that by going directly to the state assemblies and saying, this is a problem. We need an answer back from you saying yay, nay, or go pound sand.
Right.
And so all the assemblies were activated, all the assemblies voted on that, and as a result, they cannot make GMO claims against anyone in this country who received a mRNA vaccine. That's huge.
Huge.
Absolutely huge. And we were able to do that very rapidly and deploy that because the state assemblies were in session and because they were able to consider the facts and they were able to say no.
Right.
You have a voice now.
Exactly. And they need to exercise that voice, right?
Yes. And they need to be thinking about things, for example, we currently have a situation where the corporations are trying to gin up a war with Russia. Well, any state assembly could come forward and say, hey, wait a minute, we have an alliance with Russia that has been in place and has been honored since 1858. And furthermore, here are these other contributory factors where NATO is trying to lead us astray and our government is doing immoral things. Our federal government is doing immoral things that are not in compliance with our obligation to our Russian-American alliance. And so, we put all this information together, we bring it to the other states, the state assemblies consider it, and, they vote 48-2 or 48 to no comment on, reaffirming our Russian alliance and telling the federal contractors to go pound sand.
I think we need to do that.
Yeah, well, these are things that can be, we can generate it at the federation level, obviously, but you can also generate it at the state level.
That's true. Ohio just issued a notice and directive to the state of Ohio regarding the temporary protective status program and the uncontrolled immigration policies.
Right.
And we basically said borders are closed.
Right.
Until you sit down at the table with us and we help develop a comprehensive infrastructure and immigration plan, done. You're done.
So you see, the states can initiate action on their own, and they can also bring action forward for the consideration of the other member states of the Federation. So, you can act independently, as Ohio just did, to tell the state of state the their wishes concerning immigration, but you can also do it as a group, and you can establish your law or your policy as a group.
Right. It has more force if it comes from your state assembly, though.
Right. Well, and see, if your state assembly is saying, okay, um, we vote in favor of honoring the American-Russian alliance of 1858, and we condemn the lack of transparency and honesty on the part of the representation that has been made on these issues, boom, 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 boom. Then that goes straight to Washington, D.C., and it goes straight to the U.S. Secretary of State, and it goes straight to the British monarch or the Pope, whichever, both. And suddenly, oh, well, NATO, which is basically just a club of corporations, doesn't have the authority to be making these misrepresentations and to infringe upon these agreements, which is absolutely true. They don't. And so all of a sudden, NATO gets defanged, and all of this horse hooey stops.
That's right. That's exactly it.
So you start to, through our research, through our committees, through our concerns, and through our rightful standing to speak to these issues, our assemblies have been missing in action. But their vital role is still there, and it still needs to be answered. Now that our assemblies are in session, we have the power and we have the right and we have the responsibility to speak to issues that are important to our country and its welfare, state by state.
I get it. It's the work. What's the reward for hard work, Anna? It's more hard work, right?
Well, the reward for hard work in this case is things like the protection of your biological being.
Sure. Absolutely.
The protection of your property rights.
Mm-hmm.
The condemnation of illegal confiscation of property, the condemnation of dishonorable mistreatment of allies, whatever it is, we have an obligation to speak. And in their system, if we don't speak, it's considered acquiescence. Mm-hmm. So yes. When we see something that's wrong, like GMO claims against living people based on being injected surreptitiously with patented materials, and we don't raise our hand and say no, well, then they get away with it. You see.
It's on our list. Yes. It's on our list for atmospheric injections and GMO control of crops and food products, and all of that is on our list to step up and have a little say.
Right. And Ohio could say, okay, well, we don't want any of this transgenic garbage dumped on our airspace. And then they could open it up and they could bring it to the Federation as a question for all the other member states. And then we can have that kind of a roll call vote, as we've done before, on a question. Okay, somebody has to bring forward the question. Okay, should the states of the Union allow aerial spraying of transgenic or mutagenic agents in their airspace? Yes or no?
Right. Done. Well, and that also brings up an interesting point with the incoming federal administration and RFK wanting to stop genetically modified products, food toxins, air toxins that as I always point out to our assembly, there's always going to be a commercial jurisdiction. And
Right.
our job is to watch over them. Sometimes it is to cooperate with them, and in some cases support the programs that are beneficial to us because they are our subcontractors.
Right.
And so making that type of notice to the federal government as the incoming administration gives them mandate to move forward from the people to actually get the job done in support of our health and our welfare.
Remember always that your state citizens in your state assembly are parties to the constitutions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
They have the right and responsibility to enforce the constitutions on the federal subcontractors.
Mm-hmm.
So your state citizens can tell Donald Trump that no, we don't want any kind of transgenic or mutagenic substance in our airspace. And it then is his job to make sure that no such thing enters your airspace from the activity of his corporation or any other corporation. Okay? So the way this is supposed to work is that the state assemblies, individually and together, form the big vision. They direct the overall plan, the overall desired outcome. We talk about things in a big picture level, okay? We're not getting down into the minutiae. We're not telling our subcontractors how they have to organize their division of youth services, okay? We're not going to go into the micromanaging of how they deliver the end product. But we are going to tell them what the desired end product is, and we are going to hold them feet first to the fire to deliver that. Okay? So, for example, we want a system whereby parents provide a reasonable level of support to their children if they're able to do so. Okay? But we don't want something that is going to further impair the ability of parents to provide for their children. So, at a state level, at a state assembly level, we can tell the federal and state of state franchise operations that in no case will someone's driver's license be revoked for non-payment of child support. If a guy can't drive, he can't work. If he can't work, he can't pay child support. This makes no sense. We're not going along with it. And the only people that you can apply your rules to are your employees.
Right.
We can say that. We can make it stick.
Right. Well, Anna, we're up against our hour and a half. And I think we've pretty well finished with most of the topic for the day. And believe it or not, the couple of questions were integrated into our discussion today.
Right.
And I just want to give a shout out to all the people who have joined us here on the channel today, especially all of those who we got to meet in Massachusetts. There's quite a few of them here. And we had some great discussions, question and answer sessions. We had some great fellowship, and it was wonderful to be able to meet all of them. The joy was just amazing. It really was.
Well, I'm so pleased. I'm so happy. We need to do more coordination. We need to come to a greater understanding of our powers and our responsibilities, and also our history and the structure of our government. These are topics that are of penultimate interest to us, not only because of the threats to our liberty and to our freedom, and I take that as two separate aspects,
Yes.
but because it's to our material good, it's to our ability to control our environment and to control our world in ways that are beneficial to us, that's at stake. And I just can't see any more profoundly beneficial action we can take than to join together to self-govern.
Absolutely. So the good news that I have is that while we were there, we were discussing what to do about next year because we were already planning for a next year. How about that? And the discussion came up of where I live in the summer and its historical significance in terms of the last actual battle of an actual war, and the International Peace Memorial being there located. And so everyone there said, great idea, great location, let's do it. So I'm already starting to make plans for the next year. And I put an event in eventbookings.com, the American States Assembly Family Reunion 2025. And the important part is going to be, it's historic weekend on the island, that particular date of September the 10th through the 15th. And there's going to be especially activities on the 13th and 14th associated around the island and the historical events. And as well as, there's a big art in the park and there's plenty of music and entertainment that weekend. There's a historic encampment that goes on. There's going to be demonstrations. And we kind of picked that weekend thinking that it would be really great time to be able to bring everybody there. The important part is going to be that it is an island and hotel rooms and things are going to be, somewhat limited. So we need to get a really good idea early of who's going to make a commitment to come. And
correct me if I'm wrong, September 10th through the 15th in Ohio should be a beautiful time of the year where you're just beginning to see the very beginnings of the harvest season. You're beginning to see a little bit of fall color creeping in around the edges. The days are cooler, and everything is kind of brought into a magical balance just that time of year.
It's a wonderful time of the year.
Yeah.
So, temperatures are usually, somewhere most of the time they're in the mid 60s to the mid 70s. So, just perfect kind of season. So, right. Yes. So, if you're interested, I'd get on the list early. You can get a free ticket that shows us you've got interest and it gives us your email address and things so we can stay in contact with you. I've already contacted their visitor bureau and Chamber of Commerce to try to get some assistance with, what we can do and how we can do it. And so, we should be able to, in the next month or so, put together maybe some costs and some things and start to get some plans together. So,
right. And maybe we can even slop onto the mainland and contract for a ferry.
Oh, yes. Well, that's the only way to get there is a ferry. So but you
could have day traffic, you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, there are some hotels that are close on the peninsula there that, could be very easily, done with the ferry. So it's not hard. And
right.
So yeah, so we'll put together, but one of the considerations was maybe by then we're going to need to use a little bit of a conference center and have some education sessions, history, or just issues of the assemblies, and really put it together.
The
So
War of 1812,
yes,
the
yes,
Treaty of Ghent, whoever knew? Okay.
right,
So these are things that we can know, study, promote, teach, bring forward so that our population is educated. Nine
correct.
tenths of what they've gotten away with because they kept us ignorant.
Mhm. Exactly.
So upward and onward.
All right. So be looking for that, and if you're really interested and ready to, make a commitment, go get yourself a ticket, and we'll stay in conference, in connection with you, and let you know the details as we get them worked out. So
That sounds wonderful. I just this kind of activity I just love because it means that people are growing and connecting and learning. And that's what we desperately need to do in this world, not just in this country, but in all countries, within and without, because we are heir to many wonderful things, many wonderful traditions. Um, and we are being manipulated into a role as consumers and in as commercial entities, which we're not. So basically, the big lie has been put on us and put on our children for the commercial advantage of corporations. And we need to fight back. We need to reestablish not only our role, but our authority. And we need to bring the real law to bear on these miscreant organizations that have taken over and which are trying to foist their self-interested rules on us. So everything that we can do to build our communities, to build our consensus, to educate ourselves, and to become proactive. Instead of being the silent majority, we want to be the proactive majority. We want to be right there on the front step saying yay or nay to everything that they propose. Okay? We want to be right there exercising our rights. Or as I say, I'm going to march up that hill. I'm going to pick my damn blueberries. I'm going to come back down with my buckets of blueberries. I'm not going to just let them mind my store anymore because
right,
they've proven to be dishonest, greedy, oppressive, irresponsible, immoral, unaccountable. Okay, so we have got to deal with our employee problem, folks. And this is the way to do it peaceably, honorably, and with intent.
right, right. So Anna, I think we've gotten through. Next week we'll move on to the General Assembly. Get to talk about that and talk about kind of the flow and what it looks like, and I'll try to have Ohio's plan up so that we have a kind of a model to look at.
I
And
believe I have a copy of Ohio's plan here. I'm just so everybody knows, I'm spending the week sorting. My filing system got behind.
uh-oh.
But I do believe that I have a copy of Ohio's General Assembly plan. If you have it on a PDF that you could send me, I would love that.
Okay, I do.
But yeah, I'll try to do a overall review of that before we get there.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. Well, that'll do it for the day. So everyone, I hope you've got your cups all filled up, and go forward, get your committees running in your General Assembly, and get out there and get the issues taken care of. So
And your
thank you.
reservations for next year.
And reservations. Yes, and reservations. All right. We'll say goodbye to everybody for the day, and have a great week.
Go forth.
All right.
Talk to you soon.